Greenville, South Carolina. Do you know what all these companies have in common? They all bend their knee to the same master. Her name is Nika White. She is the senior advisor to the Greenville Chamber's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. She was brought to us by a chamber that seems to be listening and is enamored with a very small but loud minority and isn't really paying attention to the people at large. Now, Miss White, I was happy to see that we do agree that some things being labeled as cancel culture are actually examples of accountability. And so this should go over fine. But let's unpack your next tweak. Yo, at Twitter, you know you my favorite social media platform, right? What took you so long, though? Hashtag Twitter suspended Trump. Now, I don't know if you know how un-American censorship is, but I figured you would know how completely un-American saying, "So, is July 4th still necessary?" asking for all the black people. Really? Are ya? 'Cause I only see a 2 right there. Ma'am, you do not speak for all the black people. Now, since you are in the middle of your little diversity, equity, inclusion summit, I figured now would be a good time to bring a few things up and just see where everybody stands. Now, Chamber, I don't know how far you were willing to go with this DEI business, but if you want to sit down and talk with me about the rising suicide rates in our teenage girls, I'll sit down with each one of you and talk to you about it. Let's just go ahead and learn a little more. Consider this. Some of your coworkers didn't show up today or called in sick. They may have been in D.C. among other white supremacists. These are people that dwell among us and will be returning back to their post unscathed, might I add. Ma'am, consider this. You just made all that up, and you were sad that your fictitious characters weren't harmed. I'm really tripping out on people totally astonished about the obvious. How can you bear witness to what's happening at the Capitol and still say systemic racism doesn't exist? Now, ma'am, can you point out the systemic racism? Is it the black gentleman that shot the gun, or the white girl that got killed, or maybe it's the white guy bashing on the door, but he gets to actually go behind the police officers? And on second glance, that guy might actually be Jewish. I don't know. But you seem to see systemic racism everywhere. Where'd you see it there? Now, let's examine the master-slave relationship. Let's hear what the master has to say. Oppressors are often those who benefit from unresolved problems of racial equality and systemic racism. If you don't want to be perceived as an oppressor, own the problem and get involved. Mark S. Ohala, given what you just heard, do you believe that you are free to say only females have a cervix? Because I don't think you are, and it doesn't matter if you're the CEO of Charisma and should be able to. What was just read to you makes it impossible. Because it wasn't just talking about racism. Oh no. You believe one part of the ideology, you're in it for the long haul. Every bit of it. So when your master says boys can be girls and girls can be boys, you have to agree.
So social conservatives are increasingly asked to justify why they have decided to target transgender youth, as if they picked this issue because it polls well, or some other such nonsense. Let me make it clear why this has suddenly become my concern. It is because in America, in 2007, had exactly one gender clinic. One. Anyone care to guess how many we have now? 300. So there are now hundreds of pediatric gender clinics in the US. Planned Parenthood gives out testosterone on a first visit. Depending on the state, it absolutely gives testosterone to minors. Planned Parenthood in Oregon gives it to 15-year-old girls on their own recognizance. They don't even need a parental note. Kaiser dispenses it. So for today's teens, whether they have real or typical gender dysphoria or not, testosterone is easily available. Double mastectomy, known as top surgery, is readily available. No, they do not necessarily need parental approval, depending on the state, and they definitely don't need a therapist's note. How did we get here? How did we get to a place in which we're all supposed to pretend that the only way you know that I'm a woman is if I give you my pronouns? How did we get to an America in which a 15-year-old in Oregon can begin a course of testosterone without her parents' permission? A lot of the answer, of course, comes from the hard left, but at least one part of the answer is conservative squeamishness about issues we'd rather not deal with at all. About 8 months ago, I was contacted by a member of the National Association of Science Writers. The NASW is an association of journalists with scientific backgrounds tasked with explaining scientific phenomena to the public. And the member of the NASW who contacted me wanted me to know that a member of the online forum had been expelled for mentioning my book. I contacted the member who had been, the person who mentioned my book who had been expelled, Sean Scott, and he told me he hadn't even read my book. It just sounded interesting to him. He was immediately banned from the forum and labeled transphobic. I've heard the same thing from endocrinologists and psychiatrists and pediatricians and scientific researchers who write around these issues. If they point out the risks of gender interventions, they struggle to get their research into journals, and very often their letters to the editor pointing out flaws in studies touting all these interventions, those letters aren't published. The funding goes to research that promotes gender transition and downplays the risks. There are phalanxes of young doctors now, many of them in pediatrics or child psychiatry, who believe their primary job is social justice. And they don't hide this. They brag about it online every day. And you're starting to see this kind of thing put into practice. Perhaps America's most prestigious hospital, Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, recently announced that it would offer preferential care to patients based on race. And on questions of gender, we're seeing it with the mass celebration of transitioning treatments provided to young people by doctors who show an inexcusable complacency about the risks of these treatments. The Washington Post just last week quoted some of these young doctors and claimed that it was a factual matter that puberty blockers are fully reversible. That was the quote. Puberty blockers are fully reversible. Except that that's not something anyone can claim to know yet. They're certainly not psychologically reversible, and they may not be physically reversible either. We simply don't have the data yet. So you're seeing this startlingly quick corruption of medicine and science, and it's a symptom of a larger woke corruption of American society.
I guess I just wanted to expand on the previous question. I have a lot of doctors in my family and haven't really gotten any satisfaction when I've tried to talk with them. With regard to the Hippocratic Oath and the doctors that you spoke with, I mean, how did they reconcile performing these surgeries and hormone treatments with that oath?
So I talk about this a lot in my book because I interviewed some of the surgeons who perform these surgeries, and so anyway, I talked to them, and I go through that a little bit. But one of the things I will say is, this really is an ideology, and when it captures people, there's a remarkable incuriosity about basic science. So for instance, they will say to me, but they're so happy when they seem very pleased. I'm saving lives. They believe that. Now, the Dr. Lisa Lippman, who did the original study on this, one of the things that alarmed her, and I talk about in my book, is that when she attended a WPATH conference, that's a medical conference for transgender health. It was the old Transgender Health Society. And what she discovered was that it was the only medical conference she had ever attended. This woman is a politically progressive, where no one was discussing the risks. It was a celebration-only zone. And in fact, they would then go on to deplatform speakers. Now, these were experts in gender dysphoria like Ken Zucker. These are not right-wingers. But if they were willing to talk about risks or any course of treatment other than immediate transition, they were canceled.
Now, Mr. Mayor, you can ask Miss Nika White what the new term for segregation is. It's called affinity spaces. You can ask her what decolonizing the classroom looks like. You can ask her what decentralizing white voices actually looks like in practice. Some of the most racist stuff you've ever heard will come out of her mouth, and she won't bat an eye like it's wrong at all. And why would she? Look who she thinks she has on her side.
Hello, I am Suzanne Goldberg, Acting Assistant Secretary for the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. If you're a transgender student, perhaps you're worried about simply being accepted and safe, and being treated with respect as you head into the new school year.
I'm Kristen Clark, the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice. We know that many school administrators and educators are doing their best to make schools safe and welcoming places for all students, including LGBTQI students. We appreciate the work they do. But we also know that that's not the reality for all transgender students, including perhaps some of you. In some places, people in positions of authority are putting up obstacles that would keep you from playing on the sports field, accessing the bathroom, and receiving the supportive and life-saving care you may need. We're here to say that's wrong and it's against the law. The Department of Justice is here, along with the Department of Education, to investigate complaints about discrimination or harassment based on sexual orientation or gender identity. We want you to know that we are looking out for you, and we're here to protect your civil rights.
Hello, I am Dr. Rachel Levine, Assistant Secretary for Health. We know at the United States Department of Health and Human Services that learning environments free from bullying and harassment are vital to making sure that all students flourish, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. It is critical to support trans youth, their parents, and families to help them achieve the good health and well-being that everyone deserves.
We want to hear from you. You can file a complaint with the Justice Department at civilrights.justice.gov. The information is available in multiple languages. Discrimination will not be accepted on our watch. Right now, we are fighting against laws that tried to ban transgender athletes in West Virginia and deny health care for transgender young people in Arkansas. And recently, federal courts in both states have blocked those laws from being applied.
Discrimination and bullying have no place in our nation's schools. We all learn better when we are in safe and welcoming environments.
Parents, at this point, the only question we need to be asking is, by whose authority?
Hi, Fish. Come here. Oh, you need a name. Let's see. Wait a second. What gender are you? A person who is transgender is someone whose internal sense of their gender, being a boy, girl, or something else, doesn't match their physical body. People who feel this way sometimes feel anxious when they begin to reach puberty and their body starts to change in ways that don't match their internal sense of their gender. These feelings are totally normal. If you feel you want more time to explore how you feel about your gender before your body starts to change, it's important to talk with a parent, counselor, therapist, or doctor about the feelings you have regarding your gender. After some discussion and counseling, you may be referred to an endocrinologist. Endocrinologists specialize in hormones, and they are the most likely to prescribe puberty blockers for someone who wants them. Puberty blockers are medications that will stop your body from changing. They are usually given as an injection or an implant. They block the production of hormones to stop or delay the physical changes of puberty. The effects of the medication are only temporary, so if a person stops using puberty blockers, the physical changes of puberty will begin again. Whether you identify as male, female, genderqueer, or something else, you're perfectly normal. And there are lots of ways to manage puberty so that it can be a fun, exciting time, rather than a scary or stressful one. Okay, maybe you need more time to get to know yourself first. I'll just call you Bubbles for now. Till next time, don't forget to visit me at amaze.org or go to my YouTube channel to watch more. Bye!
Parents, what have we learned? The Chamber of Commerce has hired a person that has usurped power from our mayor and from our business leaders. She does not hold the values of our mayor or the citizens that have voted him into power. We learned that DEI isn't just about healing racial divides, but is also a tool to indoctrinate our children with a destructive, identity-taking ideology. We learned that this dude was a white supremacist. Or not. We learn that this man has to make a choice because he cannot serve two masters. We learn that the DOJ and the Department of Education will stop at absolutely nothing to get in between the parents and their children. And Mr. Mayor, the next time you go to Columbia, will you please remind the governor that we are a sovereign state and the people of Greenville, South Carolina are ready to act like it. And if you still don't get it, just read this page over and over and over again until you do.